I wanted to turn now to this big announcement during the week you made concerning naval plans for the Australian Defence Force. 11 new frigates and 6 potentially uncrewed new warships. You also have to make a decision this year around a new Chief of the Defence Force. Given the way the ADF is heading, a concentration on Navy, is the Chief of Navy, Mark Hammond, now the front runner for that role?
Nice try. I'm not about to go walk down that path in terms of who's going to be the next Chief of the Defence Force. But it is true that General Angus Campbell, who has served us so well over such a long period of time, he will have completed a 6-year term when it's done, which is longer than the normal period of those serving in the role. His time in the position comes to an end in the middle of this year. We're well down the path of determining the successorship, and we'll have an announcement in that period of time, but I'm not about to go into the details of that now.
All right, how can we be certain the government will deliver on these 11 frigates, and when will you make a decision on who's building them? When do you pledge we'll have the first one?
Well, firstly, we can have confidence about this because we're funding it. That's the first point. What happened in the announcement that we made on Tuesday was we also, at the same moment, made an announcement to increase defence spending by $11.1 billion over the decade. And we did that because the cost of this plan is $54 billion over the decade. The allocation in the budget prior to this announcement for our surface fleet was $43 billion. So we announced the $11 billion, which fills that gap. Now, the point of labouring on that in the answer is that what we saw under the former government was announcement after announcement, which was a vision of the future, but the money just wasn't there. You know, we heard them announce a $35 billion guided weapons enterprise, and they attached $1 billion to it. This is $54 billion worth of expenditure over the next decade, and $54 billion is now in the budget for that. And so that's the single most significant reason why Australians can have confidence that this will happen. This is not make-believe. This is not one of those fancy announcements from the past. This is real, and the hard work in terms of winning the money for this and prioritising this in the context of the whole budget has been done. And that stands in stark contrast to the way in which the Liberal Party went about their management of defence. In answer to the question about when we will acquire the first of the general purpose frigates, I mean, we've inherited an ageing fleet from the former government, and we inherited an ageing fleet without any plan as to what to do with it and how to evolve it. HMAS Anzac specifically was in a terrible state, and we announced on Tuesday that she will not sail again, and the process of her being decommissioned will now occur. But what the former government proposed was that the first new surface combatant that our fleet would see would be in 2034, which would be the first of the Hunter-class frigates. What we've now said is that over that period of time, we'll put 4 new surface combatants into operation, 4 times as many, and the first of those, in answer to your question, will occur in this decade, in the 2020s, and that is an extremely rapid acquisition of a significant surface combatant. But we need to do that because we have to evolve the capability of our Navy, and we have to do it quickly.
All right, and the potentially uncrewed vessels, you announced 6 of them. If there were a war, would they be uncrewed? What discussions have you had with the Americans about acquiring these?
Well, we have been in conversation with the Americans about this. It would be our intention to crew them, but we're talking about a capability that we are looking to bring into effect in the mid to late 2030s, running through to the mid 2040s. So this particular platform is a way down the path. I mean, having said that, these vessels are being developed by the United States. There are prototypes which exist today. So we have a sense of confidence about their development. I mean, when you have a plan, Andrew, you do have to have an eye to the present. That's why in terms of thinking about the general purpose frigate that we're bringing into service, we're looking at frigates which are currently operating in the water today, which have a production line building them today. But you've got to have an eye to the future as well. I mean, we're trying to develop a plan which does look into the 2030s and 2040s. And so we need to have a sense of where naval warfare is going to make sure that we are keeping pace. And the large optionally crewed surface vessels will be an important part of making sure that our fleet is at the cutting edge of modernity as we go through the 2030s and 40s. And it is a really important platform which will give us much greater vertical launch capacity, the ability to shoot missiles, and do so in a cost-effective way.
Let me play you some comments now from your counterpart Andrew Hastie in recent days, including on Sunday Agenda.
This government is a weak government on national security. It's weak on border security. This government is weak, and my call remains the same. If Richard Marles can't secure more money for the Defence Force in May, he should resign.
Well, what do you make of that?
Well, all that is empty rhetoric, Andrew. I mean, firstly, we have, as I said, announced money that will be in the budget in May, $11.1 billion over the decade, $1.7 billion over the forward estimates, and that's an announcement that will be reflected in the budget. But, you know, we at last year's budget, we announced an additional $30 billion over the decade into defence. Now, that actually is real money, along with the 11.1 that we've now announced in respect of the surface fleet. You take all of that together, that takes defence spending to 2.4% of GDP into the early 2030s. That's in the budget. What we inherited from the Liberal Party over that same period was a trajectory of taking defence spending to 2.1% of GDP. Now, they're very, very different numbers. Right now, when Andrew Hastie is asked the difficult question about will the Liberal Party support Labor's additional significant expenditure on defence, the consistent answer that comes back from them is they can't commit. Andrew Hastie should live by his own standard. Right now, their policy remains at a place of taking defence spending to 2.1% of GDP through to the early 2030s. We're at 2.4. That's tens of billions of dollars difference. Labor higher, the Liberals lower, and they will not talk about taking defence spending any further. The Shadow Treasurer has talked about the Liberal Party having defence spending within the existing envelope that they took to the last election. That's 2.1%. I mean, Andrew can talk about the rhetoric and use the words that he uses, but he speaks in the tradition of the Liberal Party when it comes to defence. All noise, no action. They're not about defence policy, they are defence dilettantes. They rest on the laurels of the idea that they have a brand advantage in defence, but when it comes to action, they have consistently done nothing. And that is where the Shadow Minister lies right now.